Hey guys, welcome to episode number 23 of LivLive. Hopefully I'm not too rusty coming back from an awesome holiday break. We took a couple weeks off there, but we're kicking off 2026 with a bang. We've got Ian Schwandt here from TDS Custom Construction up in Madison, Wisconsin. Ian is now the operations manager, production manager, writes for JLC. Has his own Fine Homebuilding podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm one of the guest hosts on that show.
He's a guest host on the Fine Homebuilding podcast. He's pretty much everywhere. So you've probably seen him, and really excited to have him here. He's not an easy guy to schedule, especially for the Wednesday morning spot. So thanks for being here, Ian.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah, and we were talking about it a little bit before. I think you kind of have a somewhat similar path to a lot of people in the world of remodeling, but yours, I would say, is pretty fast-tracked and pretty ambitious. You want to kind of talk about how you ended up in construction and how you ended up where you are today?
Yeah. I've been the beneficiary of a lot of good mentors and a lot of people who were looking out for my best interest at different times in my life where I was not looking out for my own best interest. I went to a really small high school where I feel like I probably didn't learn very much of anything. My dad, after I graduated, just started dropping me off at buddies of his that had a business, and he dropped me off one day at some block and brick masons. And that was my first entree into construction, was laboring for those guys. But on top of the masonry work, they also built modular homes, and they were creative enough to always stick like an entry addition onto it or a mud room between the garage and the modular home. And I realized I really liked carpentry, and that led me to the Carpenters Union, where I did 4-year apprenticeship there, and just kind of moved through a bunch of different companies, as being a union carpenter can allow you to do.
And then how'd you land at TDS?
So when I moved to New York State with my now wife, who was moving there to go to culinary school, I did some union carpentry work there, but I didn't really fit in with the New York crowd, whose father, grandfather, great grandfather were all members of the same union. So I was kind of the new guy from the outside, and that led me to going back to the residential remodeling roots of my first jobs in construction. And that kind of led me to that more, I guess, artisan type remodeling crowd that the Northeast has. And through that, I got hooked into doing some of the passive house training. And I didn't build any passive houses there, but I did some training at Yestermorrow in Vermont, did their net zero program, then also did the PHI envelope program at a place in New York City. And through that, kind of got to know who the passive house crowd was. And that's how I got to know Ben and Christy at TDS when I decided to move back to the farm I grew up on and build a house at the beginning of COVID.
Gotcha. So I got to circle back on the Yestermorrow, because we've had 23 episodes, only 23 episodes, and there have been 4 guests, including yourself, with connections to Yestermorrow. Yeah. Which is fascinating to me. And I didn't really know it until I had Allie Rude, who just did put out the design build movie and about Prickly Mountain, and then brought it up with Greg Wallach, who you know.
Yep.
And then Paul McManus also did courses at Yestermorrow. So there's a lot of common threads to that. Which that northeastern, it's, how do you describe it? I mean, there's a craftsmanship to it, but it's also like a provocative, think outside the box, like hippie craftsmanship.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's no wonder that South Mountain Company, the first real, worker-owned co-op in construction that was successful at scale, has its roots there. Uh, the whole NESE peer group peer review system that has the triple bottom lines ethos of people, planet, profits that started through NESE in the Boston area. So it is a hotbed of that type of craftsmanship thinking.
Well, I'm curious too, because so much of construction, especially in residential remodeling, is just a painful grind um, of complexities and emotional people management, clients, trades, all of that stuff. And when you have the roots in, and this is just me speculating, but some of my roots and my passion for building come from just building tree houses, as a kid and things like that. So when you really come out of that culture and that world of really appreciating making and building something that's brought to the world, I, I wonder if that keeps people like yourself and Greg and Paul like grinding and driving in this world of remodeling because of where you came from and kind of the love for that foundation.
Yeah, I definitely see that in the people who have been my mentors over the years and helped me kind of learn and advance my career. And I worked with a lot of guys who were well into their 60s when I was in my 20s. So, those guys are, if they're still around, they're in their deep into their 80s now. And working with that older crowd, I started to see kind of like Ghost of Christmas Future for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what led me to get into the business end of it. And I found that I really enjoyed the numbers piece and the leadership of people piece, and started to focus more on that kind of at the beginning of COVID. That was becoming my focus when I first started writing for JLC, and was writing about being a lead carpenter and managing a team of people on a project. And that just kind of kept spinning forward into larger leadership roles. And then once I got really into the economics of being a remodeler, that I think is what fast tracked my development into the production manager role.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you talk about the numbers and kind of the business and the leadership aspects of it. It's still kind of making something, it's still designing, still building something that doesn't exist. So there is like something, inherently interesting about that aspect of it, I would think, that would connect to your foundations in the Northeast and that hippie maker culture, right? Like
Yeah,
you're not a Wall Street guy.
one of the guys that I got to work with for about a year and a half in my career was Andy Engel, who was a longtime writer for both JLC and Fine Homebuilding. I think he was the executive editor for Fine Homebuilding at one point. Uh, but I got to work side by side with him as a lead carpenter for about a year. And he had this idea that he talked about often, uh, about being part of the continuum and being part of this knowledge base that continues to develop and move forward. And that was something that always stuck with me from working with Andy, because going back to the very early days of me doing any kind of work with my hands, I remember uh, the father of a woman I was with at the time, who was also a carpenter, who was kind of one of those tough guy carpenters who thought he knew everything. And oftentimes he did know what he was talking about. But I remember him giving me an article that Andy had written, back in the late 90s, when I was, like 18 years old, helping him out on a job. And he was like, read this. This guy really knows what he's talking about. And then, 20 some years later, I'm swinging a hammer with the guy, uh, living in the Northeast instead of Wisconsin. I think that was a kind of a cool intersection that I had with him.
Yeah. And then going back to Madison, and for anybody listening or watching, if you've never been to Madison, I've only been the one time, and I can't believe I waited until I was 40
You were
something to
so
go to Madison.
close the whole
I
time.
know. Well, it's one of those things when you live in Chicago, you just don't go to places that are 3 hours away.
Well, it takes you
You
three
go to
hours to
Hawaii.
get out of Chicago to begin
Right.
with, and then you've got another 3 hours to get anywhere.
Yeah, and you're also like, why would I go to another Midwestern city? Like Chicago's the king of them. So you go to Madison and you're like, this is crazy cool. You guys keep it a secret there, like nestled between the two lakes. Um, just beautiful culturally. I would imagine it's probably like a Midwestern Vermont culturally. Do you feel like that? Like you have a little bit of that, high creative nature of what's going on there?
Yeah, Dane County has a lot of that, especially when you get west of here a bit into Spring Green, where Taliesin and some of the other
Hmm.
Frank Lloyd Wright influenced stuff is. You kind of get into the hippie carpenter vibe pretty quick out there. Strong DIY ethic.
Yep. Are there building codes
I think
or
they have
enforcement?
building codes, which
Yeah.
is, unlike Vermont and Maine and other parts of the Northeast where you get away from your metropolitan areas and code enforcement really drops off. But Dane County's overall pretty strong in that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I could see, and back when I had Allie on, we were kind of talking about that because I was trying to understand how the Prickly Mountain and the Yestermar came to be, and she was kind of explaining like it's the culture there that you don't have code enforcement because you have farmers. It's just you
Yeah.
need to build a barn or you need to build a storage shed. You don't really need to go through this whole, hoopla to be able to do that. That's
Well,
you're living off the land.
you also have the libertarian vibe of why would we pay for another layer of unnecessary government,
Yes.
which is
Yep.
pretty prevalent when you get into Vermont, New Hampshire, and most, if not all, of Maine.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And then so I'm trying to bring this all together here because Ian and we met. I think when we did our case study out at TDS years and years ago. We might have met at a conference before then. But you are like this fascinating convergence um, of like conflicting things. The hippie carpenter meets the, and I see that in myself sometimes, and sometimes they're kind of at um there's a tension there in myself and like loving the business aspect of it but also loving like good design and trying to balance that. So you with your foundation in construction and then working in unions and all of that, now trying to direct um through a level of structure and Excel spreadsheets or whatever. I'm sure you're using way more sophisticated stuff than that. Like, how do you find yourself having some tension between like your passions and your love of the passive house and the things that you really care about, of being like, does it make sense to do a passive house?
You could just call me an unrepentant capitalist. That's okay. Wouldn't be the first time. I think that's what you're talking about, right? Like you still have to you still have to run a business. Uh,
Hmm.
you still have to understand what that business needs to be resilient. I think a lot of remodelers right now are looking back at 25, much like we are at TDS, and kind of going, "Whew, yeah, survived that one." And looking at 26 and beyond, kind of wondering, well, are we going to have to do that same thing again? Maybe survive on work that isn't really what we want to be doing, to live to fight another day for the kind of work that we do want to do. And what does that actually mean? How do we do that in a way that keeps the people engaged, keeps the people working, keeps enough money coming in to keep us fighting that, fighting for the next job? And sometimes that looks like doing work that you'd rather not be doing anymore as your company evolves.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And with your, and how long ago you've been transitioning to kind of full ops manager? So you've been production manager, so you've been
Yeah.
involved in driving the construction side of things. And now you're shifting over to running the design department as well at some capacity. How's that transition going?
Well, it has just started, and we are looking for that next designer hire to fill the gap that we have. Uh, Luckily, right now, a lot of our projects are interior designer heavy, and we have a strong interior designer who's been here long enough to be fully ingrained in everything that we do. So it's leveraging the people, and it's putting people in a position where they can do their work as close to friction free as possible. I think that's my main focus in this role. And it was really as much of my focus as I could make it in the production manager role, while also having to bring in enough money to keep the company moving forward.
Yeah. And with that, and kind of talking about, I guess we haven't really. I know TDS really well, so we haven't really given the listeners and the viewers kind of an overview of TDS. Two Dumb Swedes is what it's
Yeah,
originally named
or
after. But
possibly three, could have been three.
do you want to just kind of give an overview of
Yeah.
TDS and what
So
you guys do?
the company started 40 years ago as what Dave said, two dumb Swedes who were just doing kind of artisanal remodeling work in the city of Madison on older homes. And the company evolved over 30 plus years to kind of the size that we still are, that $3 to $4 million company that does 20 to 25 or 26 jobs a year, mostly for what you would call neighborhood people. We're not the company in Madison that's going to build you a 10,000 square foot house with an 8-car garage. That's not really what we do. But if you want an addition or a remodel that will keep you living in your house because you like living in your neighborhood and you've been there forever and your kids are in school and you don't want to uproot, that's more of what we're about as a company. And then, you were in Neptune with Ben for a long time, and Ben was a long time carpenter at TDS who transitioned into the office, I think, a little bit more than 10 years ago at this point, and uh, purchased the company from the guy who had owned it for 30 plus years, who was the third dumb Swede. Not actually a Swede, but the joke apparently is that he owned a Volvo. So they figured that counted at least well enough to be part of the group.
Yeah, and that's it's really cool, the legacy and longevity of TDS, and keeping that name intact, because it has just been a growth engine for people essentially coming from the trades. Because was Sam originally a carpenter?
Yep.
Yeah, so Sam was a carpenter, worked his way up. They're
Guys,
like, "Hey, you want it
guys he
now?"
was
And
with were, yeah.
yeah, and then Ben was a carpenter, and Ben took it over, and you started as a carpenter, and now you're up to running stuff. So it's really cool to see that evolution for sure.
Yeah.
Do
I
you
think
get
one of the reasons I've had success here was Ben has that ownership ability to just kind of go, oh, you're really interested in financial modeling and figuring out, how we make money. Yeah, just run with it, see what happens, and
yeah,
allow people to have the freedom to kind of explore those ideas, or be into something that others would say, no, no, that's not your job. Get out there and yell at the carpenters, make them go faster. You're the
hmm,
production manager. That isn't how Ben acts as owner of the company.
okay. And are you well, I guess back to TDS a little bit. So you guys are full service design build. Do you
Yep.
guys just build, or do you always design and build?
So as we went through 2025, uh, and we realized that the big 6 month, 8 month long high dollar figure jobs just weren't coming out of the current market. Uh, we went back to, okay, let's look at past client stuff. Let's actually return those phone calls about people looking for a small deck or looking for some kind of non-design project. And we have gone back to entertaining jobs that at one point, and not to say they would have been beneath us, but they wouldn't have gotten our attention.
Right.
But yeah, our preference is to design something and then build it and control the whole life cycle of the project.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the joy of what we do, is really the Apple model of the controlled system, the controlled environment to both design and produce, and be able to be real about pricing early on. Not have major fluctuations in pricing while it's under construction, doing a lot of work on paper before we really start tearing the houses apart. So, guys like you and me, pretty much everyone in the design build space kind of understands those efficiencies. And similar to you guys last year, I mean, we had a weird 2024, and we've had weird years where we've had projects that are out of our normal wheelhouse and process come across our desk. And a lot of times we've just kind of jumped right into them, and it's been a disaster because we're just trying to fill the work. But what we did in 2024, we rethought and said, hey, we're not gonna say no to these projects. But if we're gonna do a different project type or a different process, we need to design that process. We can't like take our full design build process and just compress it, right? You can't just do 50% of it. It has to just be a completely different process with the important steps that are there, and then tweaking the steps or making certain steps more efficient. So in 2024, we really use that as a testing ground to do what we call live light projects, where, maybe they don't need to go through a full feasibility. We can just jump right to a design retainer, get to construction faster for something like a bathroom, or a deck or a porch or something like that. So I think there's certainly something to that. And I mean, I don't think you guys are alone in having ambitions towards, or I mean, a lot of companies already have that small projects kind of division. And do you guys have carpenters in house still?
Yeah. So we have a team of 5 out in the field, and then we did recently move one of our carpenters in to be a project developer and work with the design team on kind of managing the trade and vendor aspect of the design process. And that's been really helpful. And John's really grabbed that by the horns and has done a really good job in the first 3 months of being in that role. And then we've also transitioned our PM Kevin into more of like what a commercial project manager is, where he's taken a lot of that day-to-day financial oversight of the project that I think a lot of people have their production managers do. And he's used JobTread to build a lot of really good systems for himself to track cost to complete, track schedules for the project, track a master TDS schedule that has all the jobs and all the labor on that one schedule. So that's been really good to see. And then Alex, our senior lead carpenter, has taken over like a field operations manager role, where he can be kind of more in charge of the physical plant that is TDS's production team, vans, shop, training, things like that. So it's been good to see the other people stepping up into some of these roles, and for me and Ben to be a part of leveling up other people within their roles in the industry is a pretty important thing for both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that, and you kind of alluded to it, or kind of you talked about kind of artisan carpentry. A lot of what you guys are doing in Madison is relatively specialized. How do you make that efficient? Is it on the front end? Is it on the field guys? Is it a little bit of both? How are you able to manage that?
I think it's a little bit of both. I did a site visit yesterday for a project, kitchen remodel with a remodel of living room that's adjacent to it, and we quickly found that the living room used to be a garage, so it kind of had all the weird garage stuff once you peeled all the onion layers back. But the lead carpenter on that project, Molly, had kind of run into an issue where some of the structural work that was required to change one of the wall openings made it so that the kitchen cabinetry actually no longer fit on the wall.
Been there.
Right. Pretty common occurrence of a large remodel like that. So it was cool to be able to talk to her and Nathaniel, the other carpenter on the project, and kind of come up with a carpenter-based solution of just removing that wall, turning it back into the studs on the flat wall that it started off as when the kitchen was first measured, and doing a flush beam in the ceiling, which is something that we often have to do on remodeling projects, especially kitchen ones where you're opening up a kitchen to a dining room, or opening that kitchen and dining room into one room so that the kitchen can be double the size. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff. You're not going to catch all of that, no matter how good your design process is and your development process is. Those things are going to happen.
Yeah, we're always trying to figure out how to identify where we may have an issue.
Right.
Right. Which is literally everywhere.
You have to have a culture that normalizes the fact that mistakes will happen. You can't have a culture where mistakes are forbidden, because it's inevitable in the complexity of what we do. Every house is different. Sometimes every floor of every house or every corner of every house is different. And sometimes you're going to have things that don't turn out right, and you've got to figure out what to do with them.
Yeah, and to that point, it's certainly a culture like that has to exist across both construction and design.
Yeah.
A problem-solving culture is what we call it as well, where like we lean into the challenges. Now, sometimes you get like 4 in a row, and you're like, you got to be kidding me. And you just take a deep breath and you chisel away at them. I mean, we have one right now where we have to keep the outside wall open to get a big curved stair in. The sequencing of keeping the outdoor, keeping a giant gaping hole in the outside of this addition is proving to be really annoying. And now we have millwork deadlines that are going in the other room, which is actually our access point. And now we don't want anything going through that. So now we're going to change into a temp door in order. So we have like a whole new plan B based on the sequencing of all these trades and when things are arriving and when things are complete, which are, as much as we try and drive them, are pretty out of our control. And we can't measure for the custom curved stair until it's built. We just can't. You got to laser scan it once the stair opening is actually there. Otherwise, you're just building something to a cartoon. So anyway, I could talk about that stuff all day. What kind of big, challenging, crazy projects have you guys been up to in the last year or so?
So we've done a couple of additions that I think were pretty challenging when you think about the roof lines and the space planning aspect of them. I think that's one of the things that we're really good at. We have a design team that can put that design work together, but we also have a carpentry team that can look at something. And I joke that sometimes Alex has a bit of the kind of Rain Man thing where he just has to stare at the drawings and stare at the building, and then he throws the drawings in the van and is like, yeah, I get it. Now I'm just going to build it. And it's always fun to see when things like that come together. But one of the things that Alex has spearheaded is prefabbing a lot of things in our shop. And we have a pretty good sized shop for the carpenters that used to be a cabinet shop back in the day when TDS built their own cabinets. And it's really cool to go in there and see him, fully cutting roof systems on the shop floor, stacking them up, and then trucking them over to the site and putting it up like a an erector set. So I think that's something that I'm really excited about from an organizational standpoint and keeping projects on schedule, the ability to do that. And he's extended it to trim work as well, doing a lot of casing hoops and pre-milling of things in the shop that then get completely finished, taken to the site and just nailed up. It gives us a lot of flexibility and allows us to do a lot of projects with a relatively small crew when you look at other companies our size.
Yeah, I imagine that's helps with schedule as well.
Yeah.
Significantly. And you're building everything in a controlled environment. It's cold in Madison, so you're able to do, or maybe hot, or maybe pouring rain. You're able to
Yeah.
do a lot more. Yeah, I'm very curious about where the direction of prefabbing is going. I mean, it's there in a level, and I'm down in Raleigh, North Carolina right now, and it's fascinating to see the truckloads show up of the wall panels for a
Yeah.
4-story apartment building.
Yeah.
Just boop, 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 boop. It's pretty cool to see, and how we can bring that into the remodeling world is still yet to be seen outside of additions, because so much is cut to fit.
Right.
But then you're a pretty tech savvy, tech heavy guy. What are you kind of seeing in the worlds of AI tools, or just technology tools that are really supporting you and driving the operation?
I think one of the places that I feel like AI is really going to help the design development team is, like, yesterday we did a site visit for a project that we're just kicking off the design for, and it's kind of a kooky house from the late 90s. So if you've been doing this long enough, you know the kind of stuff we were building in like 1995. It's very not square, has some kind of odd angles to it
Hmm.
and odd catwalk kind of balcony connecting two ends of a second floor. So uh, using AI to document that stuff, like right now, John was still going through with his notebook and paper and like writing down the model number of the furnace and writing down the model number and the install date of the uh, water heater. And I'm like, you got to get on Gemini or ChatGPT or something and just start talking into it and using that to generate a report of
Yeah.
what you see when you're going through one of these homes.
Yeah, I'm constantly, and I mean, I use chat for a lot of different stuff, or GPT, and we use Gemini because we're all Google based, for transcribing and all that stuff. And I'm always thinking about where we can create those custom GPTs for the team to have a defined report of things that are repeatable,
Yeah.
um, or a defined uh, contract package review,
Yep.
where it knows what to look for. It knows how to generate output that we want to see it that way. So that's going to be a really fun place to see that. How about you? You love data. Are you plugging in a whole bunch of data into GPT or anything and having it
I've
try and give you?
I've tried to, and some of it ends up being like overloading the system, and it can't really decide what I'm asking for from it. So for me, it's more about getting to understand how to write the correct prompt and to ask it
Yeah,
for what I really want. But you kind of have to determine in your own mind what you want out of it first. Uh, I have a couple of metrics that I use to help determine whether or not we're giving a project enough duration or whether or not a project is going to bring in enough gross profit dollars in relation to how much of our labor the project is taking. So I do have a few models built in chat where I can put an estimate through or a grouping of estimates through and get a little bit better of a look on whether or not a job is actually going to bring in enough gross profit for either the time that it will exist
mm.
inside of our schedule or the amount of labor that it's likely to take.
Yeah, because we don't self-perform stuff. You guys have a carpentry crew, so there's a
Right.
lot more um, work there's that goes into identifying man hours, where our subs is kind of at their risk. once we get
Right.
a number
Yeah.
from them. So that I could see that being a really cool place to dig in.
Yeah.
What?
For me, I'm looking at labor as being our main constraint,
Mhm.
and being a constraint in terms of how much gross profit we can produce as a company. So it's good to be able to look at not just labor hours, but labor dollars, and see what the actual money that you're paying out for your build team is returning to the company, because that's really the only thing that we have as a builder that generates revenue for us, is our direct labor. And one
Hmm.
of the first things that I'm working on as operations manager, also overseeing the design department, is seeing if I can fold design's direct labor into a lot of those same metrics, so that I can hold their work to the same standard as the carpentry crews when it comes to bringing gross profit to the company.
All right, I dig it. So what? On that note, what software do you spend the most time in on a daily basis?
I would say it's still probably Google Sheets,
Yeah.
with Job Tread being a really close second to that.
Can you? And this isn't a job tread ad, I promise. Even though it seems like every time anyone talks about it, it turns into a job tread ad. Can you connect data between Google Sheets and job tread, or is that kind of the point?
It's mostly either download the CSV file, which I'm not a fan of because it's too much work. So I end up doing a lot of two screen grab and paste over into a Google Sheet. But I also have my big board spreadsheet that I wrote about in a recent Pro Remodeler piece, uh, that does have a lot of that data in it already in spreadsheet form.
Have you used Gemini and Google Sheets at all? It's pretty cool.
I haven't yet. I end up connecting a lot of it back to chat,
Yeah.
because I've got the models already built in there, and my chat alter ego already knows the stuff that I'm working on. So it's pretty convenient to just feed it more of things I'm thinking about.
Yeah, one thing that I did with chat that I was pretty proud of, I had it learn Livco, I had it learn the company
Yeah,
and our core values. And so then whenever I'm asking about email responses or analyzing anything like that, I want it to do it understanding our core values. I don't know if
that's
it
cool.
really does, but it says it is.
Well, it's words.
Yeah,
It's a large language model. It doesn't feel. It doesn't really think in the term that we think in.
turns out. And it's very wrong a lot of the times. And I get really mad at it, but it doesn't talk back to me. Where an employee, if I had that tone with them, might get really upset with me. But chat's like, oh, my bad. You're right.
You don't have a Rust GPT that you can talk to?
I could. That one's a little less predictable. Oh shoot, this is live. So we're about at time here. I know we actually went a little long, but we pretty
Yeah.
much always do. So just trying to dig in a little bit more. I asked Ben if there's anything I should ask you about. And he said about gardening. What's going on
Yeah.
with your garden?
Yeah, man. 2025 was the year that I became a full-blown gardener with my wife. Really, uh, one, drinking a lot less, and two, spending a lot of time out in the garden with her. We have a 3/4 acre garden on our property, and I have a little John Deere tractor with a loader on it and a bunch of goofy little garden tractor implements like a tiller and a cultivator. And uh, I, we get out there and do our gardening, which is really large scale gardening.
Yeah, I was gonna. That sounds like a farm, not a garden.
Well, it's not a farm out by me, but
Yeah,
it's
by those
yeah,
standards. But that's if you drive a tractor to maintain your garden, I'd call that a farm garden. So what are
yeah,
you
it's
growing in there?
a lot of tomatoes, because
Yeah.
my wife's a big part of her family is from Italy, and her grandmother, who she spent a lot of time with growing up, was off the boat from the Tuscany region of Italy. So she grew up making that kind of food with with her grandmother. So grow a lot of Roma tomatoes and some other fun kind of heritage type tomatoes or heirloom tomatoes. So a lot of that. And then I think we planted 370 some odd garlic bulbs this fall. Her goal is to never buy garlic again.
Well, and that just multiplies, right?
Yeah.
That just goes crazy. It's like asparagus.
Well, yeah. This was actually the first year that we ate asparagus out of our garden too. So that was pretty exciting after having some epic fails of asparagus patches in the past.
Yeah, so I know this isn't a gardening show, but this is just a show. This is what we talk about. So I haven't had a garden down here in North Carolina. In Chicago, we lived in Riverside, and so we're right on the riverbank. So you had this really incredible soil, but we didn't have a whole lot of room for it.
Right.
But my challenge, and I think I had to do more work on tomatoes to really understand, because you can't plant them until too late. So maybe you have to greenhouse them so that you can get tomatoes earlier. Otherwise, I get like 10 billion tomatoes.
Yeah. So
August 20th.
What we do is inside of our garage where I have my wood shop, we built a small room for seed starting. So probably in the next, I don't know, 6 weeks or so, we'll start all of the seeds that we'll plant out in the garden, and we'll stage them so that we don't have all the tomatoes all at one time, and then we'll start them out in the greenhouse. So we have an 8x12 greenhouse that we built, and we'll get them started in there and then move them into the actual garden soil sometime, usually around Memorial Day weekend.
Right, because the old rule of thumb, and I remember Luann in our office would always talk about it, is you plant on Mother's Day. It's like, don't fall for it. There's always a frost in Chicago.
Yeah.
Between Mother's Day and Memorial Day. So
yeah,
you're really not even planning until June. It's really hard.
Right. Yeah. So we take a long Memorial Day weekend, and I make sure the tractor's all ready to go and all the implements are all greased up. And usually I spend most of the month of May with the tiller working up the garden so that it's ready to make rows and plant. And this year I'm going to experiment with a subsoiler, which is like a spear that you drag behind the tractor that rips up the ground about a foot deep, so that you kind of work up the bed that you end up creating by tilling year after year, so that you get better drainage out of your soil.
I like it, man. You're a man of great passion.
I don't know if anyone's ever said that about me, Dave.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Yeah. We'll have to do this again. Really super smart guy. And you didn't even swear. I'm kind of amazed. How'd you not swear?
Well, because I'm used to being on camera now, and I shut that part of my brain off. You have to be able to shut the Tourette's part of your brain down when you go on camera. And I've done I don't know if I've quite done 100 Fine Homebuilding podcasts, wow. But I gotta be pretty close, because I've been on it for probably 3 years now. I think this is either my third year now or my fourth year of being on it with Patrick and the other writers.
That's awesome. Not a whole lot of swear words, I suppose.
They get edited out.
Oh yeah. Typically. Well, we're live.
Yeah.
And this goes to Apple, and they'll label it as explicit.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I'm down to two listeners, which then maybe right now I think I see 3. So Ian, where can people find you?
I would start with my Substack, which is Nails to Numbers, Nails TO Numbers. That's where I'm doing all of my self-published business writing now. So if you want to have an understanding of some of the metrics that I started talking about here, that's a good place to look. But cool. Otherwise, you can find me on Fine Homebuilding Podcast and Fine Homebuilding and JLC's website under their author search.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on, and first show of the new year. So
yeah,
this is
23.
special.
It's a big number in Chicago.
Yeah, 23 and 26. So we're going to keep it going. Thanks again, man. Say hey to Ben and the crew, and we'll talk to you soon.
Will do.
All right, man. Bye.